Appreciate everybody for being here. Hope everybody's been having a great day. My name is Matt Henry. I am, as was stated earlier, I'm a senior leader within the Solutions Architecture organization in Greenfield West for retail CPG specifically. I have done quite a bit with this cloud thing in my career journey. It's been bookended by AWS. About 11 years ago, I was with public sector within AWS. I covered the United States Air Force. And I went to Azure for 7 years, so got a lot of fingerprints going on over there as well. And I've been back for going on 5 years. I came back as a principal solutions architect and moved into the dark side of leadership, which has been a fun journey. But real quick in the chat, would just like to know, how's everybody doing? Having a good time today? Plus ones, smiley faces, good times. Oh, we got some messages. Yes, 10 out of 10. All right. That's what we love to hear. Well, I'm hoping we get to continue that trend today. I very much I wish we could be doing this in person. I love the energy of being in the room with folks. So by all means, please continue to keep active in the chat here. I will try to keep an eye on that as we go through this. This is a presentation that I typically do with customers on premises, and I would say that it's typically tailored to the customer. One of the things I would say is, first of all, let me just ask everybody out there, who is familiar with a cloud center of excellence? Any plus ones, any hands raised out there? Plus one, excellent. So this is a very complex topic, and one of the things I would say is that it is always different for every single customer that goes down this path and takes this journey. And we'll talk a lot more about that, but in the beginning, I want to be sure everybody understands what this thing is. So when you see CCoE, I'm talking about a cloud center of excellence. You may have also heard about just centers of excellence. This one is specifically about using platforms such as AWS, and it's not exclusive to AWS. You may have a CCoE that works with Google, works with Azure, works with AWS, works with Oracle. It could work with all of the above. It could work on-prem as well. A CCoE really can be just about anything that the company building it wants it to be. But there are some key things to keep in mind. So you'll see here this AWS definition. You've probably read this, but provides guidance on best practices and governance policies within an organization. So guidance is a key word here. One of the things that I see often is confusion with the concept of central IT. So central IT and CCoE, I don't really understand what the differences are. I'm hoping by the end of this, everybody will have a good line of delineation between where those responsibilities are different and how they both bring value to organizations in different ways. But really, the thing I want everybody to come out of this with is a couple of steps that you can take to start building your own. And you'll see why I think that's so important just in a moment here. I want to talk a second about models. So if you have a cloud center of excellence, you've got this group that's providing guidance. You need a model for it. Are you going to have this standalone group that maybe you even hire for? So they're completely separate folks that their sole job is to provide best practices and guidance and governance and can do a whole lot of other things. So the models that I see, and I've helped companies stand these up for over a decade, centralized and federated are the two that you're going to see by far and away more often than embedded and hybrid, which are really, I think, combinations of these two themes anyway. The way that I would explain this is, okay, if I've got a group that's going to provide best practices, governance, and maybe do a lot of other things, how is this going to be organized? So if you think about the way the United States government is set up, where you have a federal model and you have a state model, meaning that there are some cases where federal law supersedes everything. Everybody's got to do it this way. In my opinion, that tends more toward a central IT mindset. Federated is more of the state model, meaning that we're going to have representatives from all different parts of these businesses, organizations, units, lines of business, whatever you want. We're going to have superlative folks who stand out in their teams, want to be involved and see a larger part of the company. I would say one of the advantages in this is it does create additional opportunities for responsibility and even career advancement. It's one of the things that not everybody knows about a CCoE. But centralized, again, is where we're going to make a standalone group. It's got its own people. That's their job. They are all going to be part of this team. Federated is where we are bringing people, maybe the best of the best, maybe people that want to grow. It's really up to you and your needs, but bringing everybody together with dotted lines in the organization to provide these best practices and guidance within the organization. And let's talk a little bit about some patterns. So this one is, I think it happens a lot with technical folks. You sort of get into the services and you get into the what I can build with AWS or with other cloud providers. And really, that's not going to work out so well. The way I've seen most companies be successful with a CCoE is business aligned strategy. What outcomes are you trying to enable? What are we working backward from? And we're going to talk more about working backward shortly as well. One of the things that executive officers love about CCoEs is clarity comes with getting everybody involved. So again, if we're talking about that federated model, which I'll just go ahead and say it, I recommend a federated model. There are some circumstances where a large enterprise might do better with centralized, but typically you're going to see those enterprises hire specifically for the CCoE. And that introduces different pressures and stresses to the organization, where I found the federated model is more organic. You grow, you learn together, and you all learn from each other's mistakes. But cost visibility and ownership. This is where a CEO, a CIO, I will say this also, CIOs tend to be the executive sponsors I see most often for a CCoE to be successful. Doesn't have to be, could be a CFO, could be a CEO. It's really up to your operating model. But cost visibility and ownership is one of the clear advantages of building a CCoE. Uh, Governance and compliance also come, but I would say be careful there because you don't want to get into the role of shutting things down. You don't want to be you don't want to fulfill the role of central IT, and we'll talk more about that as this talk evolves as well. Security is a really big one. One of the things that I would say is it's not enforcing security; it's suggesting security. I think the role of a successful CCoE is to enable and make lines of business and groups within organizations more self-sufficient, self-service. Here is what we recommend as the CCoE. The lines of business can come and do that, or they don't have to. They can adopt another model. They can experiment, maybe fail fast, and maybe even improve the recommendations that already exist. Training, certification, and enablement, it's a great way to get the folks who know together with people who maybe don't and help them get certifications, which will make your practice much more successful. Operations and support, sustainability is a new one, and architecture and best practices, which we've talked about. But the other thing is the anti-patterns. So these are things that I think are going to drag a CCoE down a little bit, make them not as efficient as they could be. So number one, of course, is that lack of executive support. If you don't have an executive sponsor, the CCoE will die on the vine. 99% chance of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But bureaucracy, I would say that people tend to operate in models that they're familiar with or they're comfortable with. And if you have too many levels, if you have lots of approvals, you're getting away from the point of a CCoE. You want this to be fast. You want it to be agile. You want it to enable. So get everybody moving more quickly. Gatekeeping and fiefdoms, this is also not the intended purpose. It's not about, hey, we're going to build this organization and now we're going to control everything. That's not the point here. It's about enabling, and it is not about creating a new power structure or authority chain within an organization. You can see the rest of these. I think there's a theme here, but one of the ones I do want to double click on is no established metrics or KPIs. This is so important. So really quick, uh, could somebody maybe in the chat, or if you want to step on mic, go for it. Talk to me a little bit about the difference between a KPI and give me 1 second. Apologies. Let's simplify the question. What is a KPI? Anybody want to step up on this one? A key performance indicator. So key performance indicators are going to help your organization see how it's tracking against the business goals, which we talked about, that you're setting for yourself. A line of business may need to release a new product. How do we know how well we're doing? KPIs, key performance indicators. It could be just tracking along with your agile methodology, but it might be something completely different. It may be completing a certain part of the project at a certain rate. It may be the number of errors that you're seeing. It may be the number of requests that you're getting. It could be a whole lot of things, but KPIs and being data driven about this is super important. So why do companies build a CCoE? So the first one, cost optimization. This is the one that I typically will see if there's a mandate from, say, a CIO. Hey, we need to get our arms around the cost. So cost optimization is a way for the CCoE to figure out, here's how we operate, here's the proficiencies that our teams have. How can we suggest frameworks or build reusable components toward our product that other groups within the organization can use? Cost optimization comes up a lot, and frankly, it's one of the best reasons to start a CCoE. It's also one of the places where you will see results fastest. It's relatively simple to see where, hey, we stopped using EC2, now we're using Lambda as an example, and here's how it has impacted the cost. If you want to take it a step further, you could say something along the lines of, if there is a dimension such as number of users that impacts the cost, every time you add 100 users now, the cost increases by X amount. Those are numbers that CFOs, CEOs like to see. And frankly, they come naturally when you're building a CCoE. Improved compliance. This one is typically more about awareness and the building blocks that a company uses. It's not so much about enforcement. That's really getting, again, against the grain of what a CCoE is. Faster cloud adoption. A lot of companies start with cloud and they really want to move fast. And cloud is really good at moving fast, but you can make a lot of mistakes along the way, just like when you're learning anything new. So using the CCoE's knowledge from potentially many lines of business, from potentially your best and brightest cloud's rock stars, this is a way to get everybody better faster. Reducing the risk, I think, goes along with everything we've mentioned. Productivity. If we're building reusable components and other groups are using them, hey, we've probably enhanced our productivity quite a bit. And we know, since we're using something that's recommended by the CCoE, that it's already adhering to our best practices and guidelines probably set forth by central IT. Collaboration, innovation. But again, this comes back to, you're here for a reason. You're curious about this topic. Why do you want to build a CCoE? Has anybody in the audience, plus one, built a CCoE, been a part of a CCoE before? No. Okay. This is the don't take it from me information right here. So if you look around on the internet, you're going to see a lot of great reasons to build a CCoE. I think one of the things I'm trying to do here is make it a little bit more tangible. But you can see here, this is from IDC, this is from Forrester, this is from McKinsey, this is from Gartner. This is not from AWS. So you don't have to take my word for it that a CCoE is an important thing to build for, especially for larger enterprises, where complexity just thrives. Uh, Excellent, excellent. I want to hear more about that CCoE maybe after this. But again, you can see lots of great reasons here: more productivity, better visibility, less security incidents, compliance, reduction in cloud costs, higher employee satisfaction. I feel like that's a really important one these days. Your dev teams have a place to go to communicate bidirectionally on, here's what I've learned, or here's what worked, or here's what didn't work. The CCoE wants to incorporate that knowledge for everyone. It's not just that team anymore. So I told you I was going to discuss this a little bit earlier. So working backward is super important at Amazon in general. At AWS, we work backward every single day. And I'm not gonna, this is an exercise I would do in person with teams, but since we're all doing sort of a one-to-many thing here, I'll just walk you through the exercise. But the idea is, look at these three scenarios: a coffee mug, a bicycle, and a mobile phone. I would argue that a coffee mug's job is, I want to drink my coffee. I want it to stay warm after I pour it. I want to be able to walk around with it. I want to be able to carry it. I want to be able to sip it. I want to be able to mix things in with my coffee. These are all things I know about what a coffee mug does. This is an overly simplified example, but the idea here is, if you go through the exercise of all the things that a coffee mug does, this is something that you can do in your daily organizational activities. If you're trying to build a new business capability, a new feature, a new service, a new solution, could be anything, you need to understand what it is you're trying to build. So in this case, we all know what a coffee mug is, so we're cheating a little bit. But if I just described all those things to you, the design working backward from, here's the end state, this is the thing we want, a coffee mug does that. So if you're designing software, it works the same way. You start with that end goal in mind. What capabilities do we need? What business purpose does this serve? We need to build a coffee mug. The exercise gets quite a bit more expansive when we talk about a bicycle, and it gets even further expansive when we talk about something like a mobile phone, which is incredibly complex. So normally, like I said, when I would sit down with a customer, we would go through one of these exercises, and it seems intuitive. It seems like, oh yeah, I know what a coffee mug is, I know what a bike is, I know what a mobile phone is. But in a lot of cases, we start building things before we really know what they are. And going through this exercise is an aha moment for a lot of people. It seems simple, but if you go through this exercise, you'll see, we're not really doing this. We may have some recommendations, we may have some considerations, but we're just kind of building in a direction. We're not building toward something. We're not working backward from some solution. So I love going through this exercise with customers, and I encourage you, use it internally with your teams, because there's a bit that can flip. I would say, especially for maybe some of the newer folks, maybe less experienced in their career as software engineers or operations people, seeing this working backwards in action illustrated makes a huge difference, and it can change the way a team works. So brainstorming. Okay, great. I didn't want to trust you, Matt. So I read all the things that Forrester and Gartner and McKinsey and everybody else said, and I'm in. I think that this makes a lot of sense. So let's brainstorm a little bit about what you're going to have to do to build a CCoE and be successful in its inception, but also in its operations and continuation. So the first thing, this is not hard. I think a lot of people feel it's a daunting task to build a CCoE, and if you see one that's fully operational, yes, it's like, wow, how are we going to get there? But it's one step at a time, right? So you need the right people and you need a vision. To start, Who's going to be part of this? You may be in a meeting with somebody from AWS. You may just be in a meeting on your own, but you can look around the table typically and say, well, you know what? Why don't we just start with this group? Let's start here. We're going to talk a little bit about two-way doors versus one-way doors. And this is a very much a two-way door decision. And what I mean by that is uh, Amazon is famous for focusing on decisions that can be reversed. So there are cases where you have to make a one-way door decision. That's never the preference, because if you make that decision and it's the wrong decision, if you can't go back, that's going to create a problem for your teams, your business, your customers, everyone. So from a two-way door perspective, if you're sitting at a table with your leadership and you say, well, who's going to be in the CCoE? I hope in the back of your mind you're remembering this talk and you're like, so we could have done we could do a federated model, meaning that we're going to borrow folks from all different parts of the organization, and hopefully there are people from all parts of the organization at the table, and you just make an inaugural, hey, we're all in the CCoE together, and Mr. or Mrs. CIO, you're going to be our executive sponsor. It can be as simple as that. It can start right there. But ultimately, you're going to know the right people to be in the CCoE. Uh, I love this. I heard this from a mentor many years ago. Structure frees creativity. So if we have structure around how do we handle inputs, how do we handle outputs as a business, how do we make decisions, technical decisions, business decisions, they can all be part of a cloud center of excellence. But if we have structure and we have a team that is specifically assigned, again, getting back to the best practices, governance, those sorts of activities, if there's structure around it, and let's say I'm in one organization and the thing I'm doing right now could really improve something that's happening in another business unit altogether. If you don't have a mechanism like a CCoE, and I would argue that it's the preferred mechanism, uh, you're going to operate in a silo over here. This team, what they did, this great thing that they did, this other team is not going to hear about it likely, or they're not going to hear about it until later in the year when it comes up in a water cooler discussion. So figuring out how you're distributing knowledge to different lines of business or different groups within your organization is key to the function of a CCoE. Working backward, which we talked about, one of the questions I didn't pose earlier is you should always be able to answer the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we it's the acting like a 5-year-old, right? Ask why about everything. Don't get to the point where you're annoying everyone all the time, but if you can't answer the question why, you're probably pursuing the wrong activities. Measurability. So we talked about KPIs a little bit earlier. I'm going to throw OKRs into the mix as well. So key performance indicators, objective and key results. These two things are related, they're not the same thing. So objectives and key results are at the beginning of the year, you might plan as a team what you want to accomplish. You might even do this as an individual, or you might do it as a CCoE. But the idea is objectives and key results. How are we measuring success? And then the key performance indicators. This is where you're actually looking along the way. So at the end of the year, maybe quarterly, you're going to look at your objectives and key results. This is a great thing for CCoE to do. The key performance indicators. I've seen multiple organizations come up with new key performance indicators that they had never considered before as part of their CCoE. The KPIs help you take a spot check on where you are against your OKRs. So you want to hit your OKRs at the end of the year. The KPIs along the way that you determine are going to tell you, are you heading in the right direction? Are you building the right thing? Are you doing the right activities? It's got to be measurable, and the C-suite is going to demand this. Uh, so, oops. one of the other things I like to talk about is stories. So like I said, I've been I've been in situations with companies that have built CCoEs multiple times. And I like to share a couple of stories because I think at this point in the discussion, you have a decent idea of, okay, I kind of can get my head wrapped around what a CCoE is and how it might function, how we might operate it or govern it, what model we may use, who might be included in the CCoE. But I want to be sure that we're not going down the wrong paths right away. And I want to be sure that if I can avoid skinning my knee when I'm learning to ride a new bike, that I avoid that. And that's one of the reasons I would say if you're working with AWS folks today, ask them about a CCoE. They will be able to help you. They will be able to help. Hopefully, you may already have one or you may be starting one. But if you haven't, I think an AWS solution architect is a really good person to talk to about starting the process. So let's tell some stories. Let's hop on the bike and avoid falling over and skinning our knees. The first story I'd like to tell is the tale as old as money. So one of the things that happened with a very large manufacturing customer that I worked with, this was about probably seven years ago. This customer decided, hey, we want to use this cloud thing. So they started using cloud, and they did what a lot of customers do. They started seeing success using cloud to build products. And then it was a multinational organization. They were in India, they were in Eastern Europe, they were in the United States, Canada, just about everywhere. They had a presence just about everywhere. And what happened was, as soon as one group started seeing success with cloud, and remember, this is before there was a cloud center of excellence at all with this customer. As soon as the other groups started seeing that the US organization was using the cloud and that they were having success with the cloud, there was a group in Eastern Europe and there was a group in India that decided, well, we're going to do the same thing. We want to take advantage of some of these successes because we believe our software teams can work more quickly by taking advantage of cloud. And what ended up happening is, you've heard of shadow IT. I would call this shadow cloud. What ended up happening everywhere was the spend just went, it accelerated dramatically for this customer. And when you are a CIO who doesn't understand cloud yet, and there's a lot of customers where this is the case, if you're a CIO and you're seeing the cloud, the spend go crazy, you may report to the CFO. And the CFO is in your next one-on-one is probably going to bring it up that your spend is just octupling. All of a sudden, you're just spinning up virtual machines all over the place, and nobody understands why. Nobody can trace any value. Nobody understands the outcome that's being sought with all of this new infrastructure, and nobody knows how to control it in the C-suite because they're new to cloud in this example. So shadow cloud caused a major bump in the road for this large manufacturing customer, and the way that we corralled this was we started building a CCoE with this customer. And the first thing we did was we got an executive sponsor, which was the CIO. We formed an initial team, which was comprised of members from software teams, operations teams, and they were also in the United States. They were in India, and they were in Eastern Europe. So everybody had representation. And the idea here was the CIO wanted to get introspection, wanted to understand what was going on here, and wanted to be able to explain the cost to the CFO, but also really wanted to get aligned. And this is an important distinction. It's not just being able to explain why the cost. A CCoE will help you explain the value better. So as part of our CCoE, maybe they got involved with this particular project, and maybe they said, you don't have any KPIs. So you need to establish some KPIs. You need to establish some OKRs. You need to put in some, you need to consider putting in some governance in the sense that you are leaving virtual machines on all night long. Do your developers need to be on these virtual machines 24 hours a day? And do they need to be using the biggest virtual machines they can possibly get their hands on? These are the kinds of things that factor into a CCoE and how they stepped in this case, uh, to change the behaviors, get the cost under control, and put KPIs and OKRs into place so that there was reporting that the C-suite could understand. And one of the things that I did in this particular case, this happens a lot. I was actually part of the CCoE. So you don't always have to, it doesn't just have to be members of your organization. If you're working with a partner that you're very close with, the partner could have members within the CCoE that contribute a lot. They're giving a different vantage point entirely. So I think it's super useful. AWS, you may have a solution architect or even an account manager as part of the CCoE. There's no reason not to, as long as they're participating and they're giving to the CCoE in a way that is productive for the entire set of organizations. It's very worthwhile to get that introspection from an exterior source. And like I said, the composition of your CCoE team, if you're using the federated model, it could be anyone. So as long as there is trust and maybe an NDA in place, uh, anyone could be valuable within the CCoE. So it's really up to the CCoE itself. So again, just to summarize the story, starting in the cloud journey, explosive use of cloud resources with no governance, no best practices, no nothing. CCoE came into play here, got that under control very quickly. In a matter of weeks, it was put under control. The CIO wanted to shut everything down, but the CCoE said, no, 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 no. Here's what we're going to do to curtail this. And it got brought back down under control. The spending was where it needed to be. It was well within budget after that. And best practices were starting to formulate and be codified, written down, distributed. Very important. The second story that I want to share this. So maybe you have to fail over from one site into the cloud or vice versa. Uh, any of those circumstances, if you're not actually testing your plan, then you do not have a plan. You must test if you have a set of steps to be sure that your customers are having the best experience they possibly can. And a CCoE is a great way to do that. You could build an entire practice within your CCoE just based on this. It doesn't have to be performance and reliability engineering, but you can have a practice devoted to being sure that customers are having a good experience. When they click a button, they're going to get a response in less than a second. When there's an outage in US West, US East is going to spin up additional resources to handle the load. These things are plans, but if they're not tested, they are not plans. The last story, I think this one's super interesting because this was with a different customer, um, and it involved a security team that was highly, highly detail oriented and working on very specific high value items for this particular business. They built red and blue teams. If you're not familiar with that, essentially they were having war games with their infrastructure. They had a red team, which their goal was to attack the infrastructure. They had blue teams. Their role was to monitor and defend the infrastructure. This it's in some ways I feel like that could be seen as a somewhat antiquated practice, but there is a time and a place for these sorts of things with all sorts of businesses, and being sure that you are secure, that you're reliable, that you're performant, you're durable. Those things are super important. So this story, I call it kinetic potential because one of the security folks that I had met on the team, they were again sort of they were tucked away in a corner within this business, and a whole lot of the other lines of businesses didn't know anything about them, did not know a thing about them, but they were telling me stories about how in their business previously, uh, there was a case of somebody being injured by robotics. This is what kinetic potential is. If software is making decisions that can hurt people, that's a big deal. So security, very important, because an external attacker could potentially compromise some of the hardware, could end up hurting people, all sorts of things could happen. The gist of this story is, and I think the valuable part of this is, since nobody in the organization knew about the security team really, they were at the beck and call of the CIO and the CISO. They were doing very specific functions, going and testing specific things for security concerns. And what we found is, why isn't this group aligned with the CCoE? So this company had a CCoE that was moderately effective. We got involved with them and helped them become a great deal more effective. But the idea is, having a CCoE, you're always on the lookout for organizations that are underutilized and others that may be underserved. There may be groups that are not getting the support of this security team, which they desperately could use. So bringing members of the security team into the CCoE, all of a sudden we've extended the usefulness of this team, their best practices, all of their learnings, to everyone else in the company. It made a huge impact. The CISO was super excited about this. The CIO also. A lot of the work that they had already done was applicable to multiple lines of business, and it was leveraged immediately. They were taking advantage of frameworks that were used, methodologies for operations, checking on potential security breaches, things that were not being done in these other business units. So these stories show, I think, hey, don't make this misstep of the shadow IT, hey, we're just accelerating our spend out of control early on. CCoE can help with that. Going too fast, like building a PRE as your second practice within CCoE, is probably too far too fast. And then understanding that the CCoE will shed light on value all over the company that you didn't even probably know you had. So as long as you're being inclusive and you're bringing people from lots of different groups together, you're going to take advantage of all of their best practices. So what have I learned working with these customers over a decade in building CCoEs? And I'll tell you, the first two are the most important. The executive sponsorship is imperative. If you don't have a CTO, a CIO, a CISO, it could be a CFO, it could be a CEO, it doesn't really matter. But if you don't have an executive that makes it the business of people involved to care about these things, other priorities will dominate and you won't see the benefits. You won't see the value of having a CCoE. You won't take advantage of distributed knowledge or self-service to the extent that you could. So I think executive sponsorship is number one. You can build a proposal to build a CCoE and take that to an executive. Hey, be our sponsor. But if you don't get that, go to another executive or change your narrative in how you're receiving that support, because you must have this. The second one, I hear this everywhere I've ever gone that has eventually built a CCoE that did not start with one when they went into their cloud journey. Everybody wishes they had done it sooner. When you start seeing the benefits of different organizations cross-pollinating, it ends up paying for itself. Everybody has their day job in the federated model, so they're still contributing to their line of business or whatever team they're on, but they're also part of a larger community that's sharing in the organization. And this may seem like like if maybe you're part of a smaller business, it may not apply now, but having this built as an organization grows, the complexity grows. Having this in place can make the growth of an organization a lot less painful. So we talked about the central or the CCoE complementing central IT. They are not the same thing. Central IT has a completely different remit, and they will do things like enforce security standards. They will actively check certain things are the way that they're supposed to be. Nobody's operating outside of the guidelines. But a CCoE, on the other hand, is hey, we've built this library that is compliant. And if you want to use it, drop it into your code project, and there you go. Take advantage of it right now. It's reviewed by CCoE. It's reviewed by Central IT. What you just did there is scale your organization, because the CCoE is responsible for getting that code verified and approved through Central IT for use. Once that's done, everybody else can just go to the CCoE to take advantage of it. So it offloads some of the work that Central IT is not traditionally known for. They're not going to actively go look for things to bless. A CCoE can take that role, and can move a lot of weight off of the field or organizations and lines of business to work with Central IT. I titled the talk after this. I don't ever say wait, and I never say done, because I feel like in our lines of work, you can be done with a task or um, a milestone or things like that, but it feels to me like nothing is really ever done. Everything is aspirational. Everything is going to be bigger. Everything is going to be better. And wait is just not a good word to have in your vocabulary. It's better to be parallel and go find the next thing. Yes, maybe technically you're waiting on something, but you're not waiting. You're not doing nothing. You're moving on to something else. And I just think that when teams use the word wait, it it does drop the efficiency a little bit. It's a psychological thing. And this is something that a CCoE can help with in terms of best practices, how to multitask within the organization, what's important, what's prioritized. Working backward to reduce complexity slash entropy. So we talked about this a little bit. You want to start with the coffee mug. We need a coffee mug. That's what you start with. This coffee mug can do these things. You don't say, ah, we need a way to drink coffee. Let's go build this bowl thing. You start with the solution and you work backward from that. And a CCoE can have such expertise in this area that they can actually float to different lines of business and help them be successful in doing this. This is another big one. I would say I'm borrowing once again from the Amazon mindset, but we talk about failing fast. Every business has its own culture. I tend to see customers be more conservative on the risk. So there's this sense of we don't want to incur risk if we don't have to, and I get that. But a lot of times you learn things when other things, maybe it was a completely different intent. If it failed, you still learn something. And that's one of the advantages of having a CCoE involved is, okay, if you're going to do this, at least figure it out fast. And here's how we can enable you to run the experiment. And if it fails, we're going to take the learnings to everybody else. And if it succeeds, we're still going to take the learnings to everybody else. I think this is a personal one, but I've seen it be successful in helping CCoEs work. Uh, you want to be scrappy. You want to be stubborn. You want to not give up on this idea, because there's going to be days where your priorities elsewhere dominate and you're not putting any time into the CCoE. That's okay. There's times where the CCoE is going to be relatively quiet, but it still needs to have its cadences and it still needs to be doing its thing, operating to help the organization. So here's my call to action. How do we start this? How do we build a CCoE, and how do we get started today? So this diagram is talking about, in my opinion, the steps I've seen most successful in order. So first, next, soon. These three levels here, first is go do this today. Go talk to your leadership tomorrow. Like do this immediately. Figure out who's going to be your executive sponsor and start there, because if you don't, you won't. And then the CCoE will be in a scary place, because it's not really serving one of its primary intended functions. Uh, Creating a vision statement. Every CCoE, like I said, is different. Every company operates differently. So you may index a lot more highly on, we want to be sure we're doing this to ensure we're operating efficiently. Other companies may say, our customers demand a certain level of service, and we want to ensure that we're following our own best practices to be sure that we give that to our customers. Assemble a skilled and diverse team. This is the other thing. Literally, you could be sitting at a table and say, all right, we're going to start with 3 people. It's going to be me, it's going to be John, and it's going to be Sally. And our executive sponsor is Julio. That's what we're doing. That's what we're starting with. Two-way door decision. Sally may drop out tomorrow. She may win the lottery, and everybody's happy for her, but she's no longer going to be part of the CCoE. That's okay. The idea is that the people all bring things that live beyond the people to the organization through the CCoE. So those are, I would say, the things you want to start immediately. Who's going to be my executive sponsor? Who's going to be on the team to start with, and know that those things can change? And what is our vision? Like, where are our imperatives for the CCoE? What initial problems or long-term problems do we want to tackle with this group? After that, you're going to look at your operating model. So again, I recommend you take that federated approach. I have seen enough examples of this that I almost say it's de facto for me. The places where I've seen sort of the central model work, uh, it's probably going to be either a smaller or a very large company. But I feel like for most folks, federated is the way to go, especially from the start. And conducting cloud readiness and maturity assessments. AWS has lots of ways to help you be organized about what your people know, like where there are gaps in skills or certifications, or where teams are not performing very well. AWS has lots of assessments. If you speak with your account teams, you'll get lots of recommendations for this one. But cloud readiness and maturity assessments, figuring out where you are today. You're not probably in a position to start a PRE practice tomorrow, like we were talking about earlier. So start small. Soon. So like in the next couple weeks, define your scope, your charter, and tenets. Tenets are something I encourage everyone to go read about if you don't know what tenets are. These are the Amazon's leadership principles are actually tenets. What they do is they help answer questions. If I'm working on something and I run into a situation where I don't know which way to proceed, if I have tenets, the idea is the tenets will help keep me on the road. They will help me make a decision so that I'm still consistent with the vision of our organization or our team or whatever. Tenets can apply at a team level, a group level, an organization level, an entire company level. Um, so just remember that the leadership principles for Amazon are tenets. Uh, Build a cadence to measure and report impact. This is where you're going to get your executive sponsor involved very quickly. You're going to say, here's our first practice, which maybe it's cost management. Our first practice, here it is. We've identified these KPIs. We are keeping consistent with your OKRs. Here's how we're doing right now. Here's what we've noticed. And what will happen is there will be some dialogue, there will be some next steps, and those will be communicated out through the CCoE. Remember, the CCoE is not there to shut down or disrupt. It is there to enable, to bring self-service to other teams. They still get to make their decisions at the end of the day. Um, so establishing your first CCoE practice, looking over here on the right for aspirational. I left this in. I had actually recommended this for a particular customer. You see here in the square brackets on the right side, those are indicating priority. So strategy, governance, and culture is a really good practice to have for a CCoE. And for the customer in question, it was exactly what they needed to make progress in cloud. But again, I think for a lot of customers, cost management is probably going to be the first one. It's the one that's had the most active research. You can find the most help with it. And frankly, the reporting tools within AWS are so good these days, it's not hard to see what you're spending, be able to visualize it, share that with your executive sponsor, and figure out how you can make improvements that will affect other lines of business and groups within your organization. So resilience and reliability is another really good one. Training and certification. You may build your own artifacts to help people get better in the cloud. Architecture and design is going to be there. It's going to be one of the top three almost every time for a cloud center of excellence. Um, right now, AI and ML, huge topics. Maybe you need to bring the best of the best together from several lines of business to figure out the best way for everybody to move forward. And again, lines of businesses don't have to take the CCoE's advice, but if it's provided and it's self-service and it is going to help a line of business be more successful, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they take advantage of that? So you get the idea here. Uh, so we are at the end. This is a huge topic. I really hope that I have shared some stories that keep you out of the gutter, maybe some that really keep your eyes on the prize where you want to go. Your AWS account team, if you're working with one, I highly recommend you figure out who that account team is, and work with them on this. Ask some questions about this. It doesn't cost you a thing, and in the end, it can make a huge difference within your organization, how it operates, and helps the C-suite see what's actually happening in the larger organization.